Hi everyone. It is Sunday at about almost 8:45 p.m. As you can tell, this is not my typical setup. I am actually in Washington, D.C. today. I came up here last week for a couple things. First of all, my dear friend, actually my bestie for 21 years now, was promoted to the Judge Advocate General of the Navy. He is the senior most lawyer in the Navy, and I was up here to attend that ceremony and congratulate him and stand up with him. He and I were best friends all the way back in Bahrain. And that was 1997 when we met. And I was the regional legal services officer in Bahrain. He was the number 2 lawyer for the commander of the 5th Fleet in Bahrain. And so our paths crossed quite frequently professionally, but we were both in Bahrain, and at the time it was an administrative support unit. So it was a fairly small campus. And so, our paths would cross at the gym and at the church, but we really didn't get to be really close until about 2 or 3 months into my tour, when a case came up in which there was a conflict between the Department of Defense and the Department of State over how to deal with my client, who had been accused at the time of attempted murder. And it's a long story. One day I will tell you this whole story. But he wasn't trying to kill anybody. He was basically really drunk and ended up in a cab where someplace he did not belong. But the long and the short of it is that the Emir of Dubai wanted to take custody of this individual and try him under Sharia law. And obviously the Department of Defense was not okay with that. Department of State had a different position. Since my client had violated a whole lot of rules to get himself into that pickle in the first place, they kind of wanted to allow the UAE to take jurisdiction over the case. So anyway, the long and short of it is, because there was this conflict between Department of State and Department of Defense, I went down to Dubai, did the court-martial, actually really good outcome for my client. He pled guilty, but we managed to get a great sentence for him. And at the end of the day, we ended up not being able to leave. My client was not able to leave. I was not able to leave. And John was not able to leave. And so, the client went into the brig on one ship, and we ended up cross-decking him from ship to ship. And John and I just ended up hanging around Dubai until the powers that be back in Washington figured out what they wanted to do. So during all that time, it was just him and me kind of hanging out. And we went golfing, and we just kind of went shopping. I mean, there's really not all that much to do when you're, kind of sitting around trying to wait for orders and direction from the mothership. So we just kind of hung out with each other. And even though we came from radically different backgrounds, John's from a very conservative family in Central California. Obviously, I come from a much more liberal family, a small family. His family's a really big family. But over that time, we had these long, meandering conversations about everything under the sun. And I learned to truly admire and respect his professionalism and just a quality person that he was. He got to know me. And we just became besties. And for the duration of my time in Bahrain, we were just kicking it buddies just hung out all the time, literally all the time. And when I left and I came back to Washington, he ended up coming back to Washington, and we stayed best friends. We traveled together. We went skiing together. He helped set up my house here in D.C. He helped set up my farm in Pennsylvania. I've met his family. I met his children. I mean, not his children, but his siblings. He has 5 brothers, I think. I met his parents. He met my parents. He met my friends and my besties. And so our lives have cross-pollinated for 21 years. And it was a tremendous, incredible moment for me to watch him, reach the pinnacle of our chosen profession as lawyers in the Navy. And he is the singularly most universally respected and admired naval officers I've ever run across. He's a truly good person and brilliant lawyer, and just just wonderful guy. So anyway, I got to be here for that. It just so happened that it coincided with the Congressional Black Caucus, which is an annual meeting that is led by the Congressional Black Caucus of Congress. But they also have all these meetings to discuss all these different issues that are facing the African American community in politics and health and finances and all these other things, sort of the state of Black America, if you will. There's all kinds of meetings. And what's really cool about it is that a lot of the members of Congress participate in it, but also a lot of candidates and so on. There are lots of parties and after parties and whatever. I don't have the stamina for the parties that I used to did, but I did go to a lot of events, a lot of speeches. I spoke at a panel, and got to run into a whole bunch of candidates whose paths I crossed with at various and sundry times throughout this election cycle. And of course, got to see my bestie Andrew Gillum and got to know Stacey Abrams and Ben Jealous a little bit better, and Johanna Haynes and Ayanna Pressley and Lucy McBath and many others who are here, to raise money, to up their profile, whatever. So it was really, really cool. I did have a good time here. But as I was up here, a couple things were happening. Number one, we had this major Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina, and I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that 11 Americans have lost their lives. This is in a very, very sad state of affairs, but I don't believe that the worst has passed yet of Hurricane Florence. It started out one kind of storm, and it kind of ended up a totally different kind of storm. It started out this massive Cat 4 monster with these huge high winds, and by the time it landed, it was something else, not any less dangerous. In fact, in some ways, more dangerous because it was far slower moving, but it dumped these huge volumes of rain. And we have not seen the totality of the flooding that's going to be correlated to Hurricane Florence. So, to our brothers and sisters in South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, whoever's affected by this, please know that us Floridians are praying for you. I know that our electrical guys are probably up there helping to get you guys restored. There's, almost 1 million people without power. Floridians understand the anxiety involved with all of that, and so we are praying with you, we're rooting for you, and definitely have your back. So that's enough about the weather. I will say one last thing about the weather is that Hurricane Florence was an unpredictable and, extraordinarily problematic storm because it didn't seem to conform to expectation. It was bigger, it was stronger, it was slower, it was wetter than storms typically are that hit that part of the country. And what we're seeing is that while Florence was hitting us, we saw all these other storms out in the Atlantic. We have a massive storm in the Pacific and typhoon out there. And it's just indicative that all of the things that the scientists have been telling us about climate change are actually being demonstrated in our climate patterns that are wildly more virulent than they have been in the past. And just the sheer volume of storms, the impact of the storms, the size, the amount of water involved in these storms, which is correlated to sea temperatures and water temperatures, which are increasing, and also sea level rise. And so the tidal effects from these storms is more significant. So all of this is correlated, and I want people to understand that this is a problem, and this is a problem that's going to get worse if we keep burying our head in the sand and we keep electing people who do not respect science. So enough about that. The big story of this week has been what has been going on with our Supreme Court nominee, Mr. Brett Kavanaugh. Now, y'all know that I am not a fan of Brett Kavanaugh. Never have been, never will be. Now, and I want to separate the two categories because I want to talk about this tonight. This is my topic for tonight, and I want to separate the two categories for you. There is a category about the perversion of the confirmation process. That's not really on Brett per se. That's on Chuck Grassley and his cohorts and the other members of the Senate. And there's a lot to be said about the fundamental immorality of the perversion of that process. Because if you pervert the process of confirming a Supreme Court nominee, then the decisions from the Supreme Court after that always have an asterisk next to them. And a lot of what makes our country function is the acceptance of the American people, that the decisions from the Supreme Court are not partisan, that they're not political payback, right? That they are the legitimate agreement of the smartest jurisprudential minds of our time, right? That's what it's supposed to be, and for the longest time, that's what we accepted. I want to remind you guys of what happened when Bush v. Gore happened back, I guess that was in 2000. you know, our European friends, our South American friends were convinced that a constitutional crisis was going to occur and that there would be blood in the streets, because that quite often is what happens when there's such a conflict regarding the turnout of an election. But the Supreme Court did step in there, to the chagrin of many people like me, but they did step in, and they made a final decision, and the American people accepted that final decision. Not because the decision was right, but because we accepted that the Supreme Court was had the authority to make a final decision, and that it was acting on behalf of the United States and not on behalf of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, right? That it was acting for the greater good. And when you believe that, you were willing to accept their decisions. In perverting the process of confirmation, and not just Kavanaugh's, but the refusal to entertain Merrick Garland and all of that, what they've done, what the GOP has done here, has basically pulled out from this process a belief that this is anything but partisan hackery, right? Kavanaugh wasn't even trying to fake the funk that he was anything other than the chosen judge to protect Donald Trump. We can't even make a straight-faced argument about this. He was the result of a deal made by Anthony Kennedy and Donald Trump and his cohorts and the GOP. This was all decided ahead of time. There was nothing legitimate about this process. There was certainly nothing legitimate about the vetting, the information that was made available about Kavanaugh. There was nothing legitimate about the questioning, the timing, how quickly they were trying to ram this through, how it played in terms of trying to get it done before the election, and all of these other things. I mean, basically it was pure kabuki theater. It was absolutely a fake process from beginning to end, and it was done over the objection of the Democrats. They weren't even trying to get bipartisan agreement here. They knew they didn't need it, and they're not trying for it, and they just wanted to have some kind of like fake clown little, game of confirmation so that they could check the box and say a confirmation process took place. They do not care how illegitimate that process was. I mean, let's talk about that for a hot second. The documents that were being provided to the Senate in order to consider and review to question Kavanaugh were curated by his best friend. Like, his team decided what documents the Senate would get a chance to look at. Now, you know and I know that is not our process. That was not the process for any justice up to this point. Period. None. Not even Bork. Not even Harriet Mier. Not even, Clarence Thomas. No justice went through a process where their own law clerks decided what they were going to see. Like, nobody did that. So the whole process was perverted from get-go. It was not designed to be a confirmation of an independent justice. It was designed to be the jamming in of Donald Trump's get-out-of-jail card. That's what it was designed to do. And the reason the GOP was willing to go along with that is because, in addition to being Donald Trump's get-out-of-jail-free card, Brett Kavanaugh is the cut taxes, cut Medicare and Social Security, and reverse Roe v. Wade card. And those are like the golden triangle of conservative ideology, right? And not even conservative. I would say originalist ideology, right? So the GOP was willing to go along with a completely perverted and illegitimate process in order to get this guy on the court, because it's a lifetime appointment. And I think even they know from a demographic perspective that they may never have the keys to the kingdom like this ever again. So if they're ever going to get a Supreme Court justice on the SCOTUS that is their dream guy, this is it. This is their chance. And I think they know that, all things considered, it's unlikely they're going to get another opportunity like this. So they were willing to do any old thing to get Brett Kavanaugh on the court. And they almost got a lot away with it. And they may still. But something really interesting happened over the last 3 days. A woman apparently had written to the Democrats on the nomination committee, including Senator Dianne Feinstein, alleging that Brett Kavanaugh attempted to rape her when they were back in high school. and that this is a very troubling and problematic thing because Brett Kavanaugh is going to be ruling on issues critical to evidence used in rape cases, jury instructions that go in rape cases and date rape cases. He's going to be presiding over so many, like there's a whole lot of litigation around this Me Too stuff, from Les Moonves to Harvey Weinstein. Any one of these cases could end up at the Supreme Court, and Brett Kavanaugh could be ruling on these things. So this woman stands up and says, look, I don't want to personally identify myself, because every time a woman steps up and makes a claim of an allegation of sexual assault, the first thing that happens is an avalanche of attack on her to discredit her, right? We know this to be true. This is exactly what happened to Anita Hill. This is exactly what happened to the women that accused Roy Moore. This is exactly why people like Les Moonves and Steve Wynn and Harvey Weinstein were able to get away with what they were able to get away with for so long. So a culture around attack the accuser has percolated, and so she didn't want to personally identify herself. But her letter was pretty darn detailed. And what I find fascinating is that we would have never heard about it had this guy named Ronan Farrow not written a story about it. Somehow it got leaked to the press, and Farrow followed up, did some research, did his journalistic duty, and got figured that there's actually some legs to this story, and he put it out publicly. Had it not been for Ronan Farrow, we would have never heard of any of this, because in her wisdom, Dianne Feinstein decided not to ask Brett Kavanaugh about any of this in the confirmation hearing. Now, I want to tell you, I'm troubled by that. Just going to say, I'm troubled by that. Now, we know that they asked Kavanaugh about a whole bunch of stuff in that confirmation process related to the 4% of his total record that they were given access to. Right? 4% of his record they were given access to, and that 4% was troubling in and of itself. Isn't that wild, right? In those documents, in that confirmation process, it became clear that Kavanaugh had been lying. He lied in his last confirmation process about obtaining emails to slander and attack that were basically hacked emails, and he used them. And he claimed he had no knowledge, so he lied under oath at least once. And it looked like he lied under oath twice. So that was already percolating in the background. There was other things going on with his finances, like how does he go from $280,000 in debt to not in debt overnight? Who paid that? And what did they get in exchange for paying off his debt? We need to know that. Okay, so all of that was percolating. But this thing didn't come up. No, for real, it didn't. And I'm like, that's interesting. So at first, there's the story that comes out, and the typical actors, the typical pundits say, well, we can't take an anonymous person's word for it. If they're not willing to come forward, then we just can't consider it. We got to go ahead and confirm this guy. Now, I had beef with that. If y'all follow me on Twitter, you know that I was having beef with that, because that's not the standard we use for any other kind of criminal complaint. We have anonymous complaints filed against people all the time. And what they call for is not a blanket acceptance of the allegation, but a fair, impartial investigation. That's all we were asking for, right? Let's investigate whether there's anything here. And people saying, well, unless a woman is willing to allow herself to be publicly flayed and put up on Mount Calvary, then we should never take a woman's word for it. And I'm like, no. That is not the standard that we use with any other criminal allegation. We follow up on anonymous tips all the time in every other context. So why wouldn't we follow up at a minimum on this to start asking some questions? That's all I was saying is like, hey, if there's an allegation here, let's at least follow it up. We shouldn't have to wait for her to be willing to allow herself to be attacked publicly. That's a chilling effect. That's what women, why should a woman have to be flayed publicly in order to have her allegation taken seriously? That's BS. So we got to change our thinking about that, period. Okay? So, but moving on from that, Ronan Farrow writes a story. People start digging. people like Michael Smerconish and people like Tom Nichols are out there saying, well, you know, we can't take this seriously if she's not willing to split. And then all of a sudden, she decides to come forward and speak her truth with her own name, right? So this woman turns out to be a professor in Palo Alto, California, who went to high school at the same time as Brett Kavanaugh. No, they didn't go to the same high school because Kavanaugh went to a private boys' high school. But in that story, she names who was in the room. There are notes from her counseling sessions with her husband from 2012 and 2013, years that nobody knew Kavanaugh, and she named him specifically in those notes. And, oh, by the way, she's passed a lie detector test. Now, isn't this interesting? Now we have a really interesting scenario, because not only do we have an allegation that is temporally sound, specific from a person who has nothing to gain from all of this and has passed a lie detector test, but we contrast that to Kavanaugh, who's already been caught lying under oath. And not only has he already been caught lying under oath, but his behavior around his credibility with women is creepy AF. First, there's the showing up at the hearing with his high school girls basketball team. The first time I saw that on TV, I was like, that is so weird. Why would you do that? Like, I mean, it's nice that you coach a high school girls basketball team, but so what? Like, what is that supposed to do? They showed up there to kind of bolster him and bolster his credibility about how he deals with women. Then there was this letter of 65 women who signed a letter saying, I know this guy and I think he's a great guy. Again, to bolster his credibility when it comes to issues with women. But that's so weird. That's so weird because, like, I'm about the same age as Brett Kavanaugh. And I've actually stayed in contact with people from high school. But never in a million years would I put my neck out and say, this guy that I went to high school with, I know well enough now, 50 years after the fact, to assert that there's no way he could have been engaged in a sexual assault. I don't know anybody in my high school that well. He may have been cool to me. But that's not proof that he was cool to everyone. That doesn't disprove a claim of sexual assault. That's weird. Now, I thought it was weird that 65 women would sign this letter. I thought it was weird that it would come up so quickly. So part of me says it probably was in the works all along. Maybe it wasn't. But I am real interested in these 65 women now. I feel like we should call them all onto the stand and have them explain under oath how they're so certain that Brett Kavanaugh is such a good guy. Exactly how much time did they spend with him? Did they stay in contact with him? Did they keep track of him? Did he talk to them about his positions on women? Because now they're now his character witnesses. And if they're his character witnesses, then I think they need to testify. What do you think? Because I would never sign a letter like that. Not ever. That's weird. And so anyway, I digress. But when you put that in context, when you look in retrospect and you say, here's a guy who shows up at his nomination hearing with a bunch of teenage girls in tow for the express purpose of bolstering his credibility on women's issues. Because we all know he hates Roe v. Wade. Then 65 women said, oh, well, he was nice to me back in high school, as if they even talk to him now, which I doubt, right? And probably didn't talk to him then either, right? And then we find out that this woman who agrees with him, who's leveled this allegation against him, is credible, passed a polygraph with notes about this event that took place 6 or 7 years ago. So not in the context of this confirmation, not politically motivated. Now, where are we? I'm here to tell you, from my perspective, Kavanaugh is done. He's done. It's over. Now, the reason I think this is because the GOP does not have a play here with him. They don't have a play here. They think they do, and it's going to take a while for them to come to peace with this, but they really don't. Because there's only a few angles here, right? Angle number one is, old girl is lying. They've tried that angle before. And the politics around accusers and Me Too movement and so forth is such that just categorically saying a woman who accuses a man of something is categorically not credible. That's just not. We don't accept that in our politics anymore. That's just not a thing. So you don't have that play, right? If you want to try to attack her personally, good luck with that. I'm sure there are going to be Republicans who try. I would advise against it. Because us women, you do that, we're going to come after you. We're not playing defense anymore, boo-boo. You come after her, we're coming after you, just so you know. And it's going to get ugly. And it's going to be protracted and drawn out and publicly flaying. And hey, if you want to start pulling apart people's lives, okay, but two people can play at that. I highly recommend that you not go there. It's not going to work like it did in the past. Don't do it. So I'm thinking that's not a good play. Then there's yeah, it did happen, but it happened so long ago. And so, like, why does it even matter? Because we're not trying to send him to jail for it. This is an assessment of his character and his suitability to be on the Supreme Court. So if it happened, then it is, by definition, something that makes him not right for the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court makes judgments about things like sexual assault and the standards of evidence and all kinds of stuff that relate to things like sexual assault. So if he himself has participated in that activity, even if it's a long time ago, it brings into question his impartiality on stuff like that. So no, that's not a play either. It didn't matter play, it's not a thing. Then there's why should he be crucified over something he did so long ago? The boys will be boys. Why should we destroy his life over this angle? This is the angle that was used to get Brock, what's his name, off after a rape. He spent 6 months in jail. He destroyed a young woman's life. And the judge who sentenced him to 6 months said, I don't want to destroy his future. Let me tell you something. Most of us women are over the notion that a man's future is something far more worthy of protecting than a woman's future, than a woman's well-being or psychic well-being. So that's not a thing. It's really not a thing. And it's particularly not a thing when you consider how seldom those same people would argue for the protecting of the future and the potential of young black men, right? They're the first ones to go out and say, the guy that just got shot, he had weed, ergo it's okay to shoot him. What? See, yeah, that's not a thing either. That's not a thing. But even if you were going to go with it took place so long ago and it wasn't really that big of a deal and whatever, you still can't get around the fact that he categorically denied that it happened and then got somebody to lie for him too. See, the problem is he lied. And it wasn't one of those, I do not recall, I don't think it could have happened. It was I categorically deny that it happened. So one of these two people is lying, and the person that is most untrustworthy is the one who has something to gain by lying. That's a maxim of the law. The person you should look at most askance is the person who has the most to gain from lying. In this situation, who has more to gain by lying? It's Mr. Kavanaugh. And, by the way, he's already been caught in a lie already. So his credibility is problematic. You don't have a play here because he categorically denied that it happened, right? So now you caught him in a lie in addition to behavior that is beyond unseemly. This is all going to play out publicly. It's not going to just go away into the ether. So whether or not Grassley chooses to reopen the confirmation hearing, I assure you, ABC and CNN and MSNBC is going to have this one on primetime interviews, and it's going to get played out publicly. And unless this woman is a complete yahoo, and I can't imagine that she would be, this is going to get played out in the court of public opinion. And hey, Republicans, there's no play for you here. There's no play for you. There's no way for you to come out looking good in this scenario and continuing to push this candidate. There's no way, because he's either a misogynist, a liar, or both. You got no play here. The best thing you can do is withdraw his nomination now. Because if you allow this to be an anchor around your neck in the next 50 days, at election time, there will be electoral hell to pay. Hell to pay. And I'm just suggesting to my dear friends in the GOP, this is not the Mount Calvary you want to get crucified on. And the reason, there's a third little element here that just kind of adds to the whole story about why this is not the hill you want to die on. And the reason that this is not the hill you want to die on is because you actually have perhaps a small chance of getting somebody else onto the Supreme Court that may not be Trump's guy, but might be your guy, right? And that you could do that after the election. And you could still come away as the white knight, sort of, hey, we believe in rule of law. We don't believe in perjuring yourself in the confirmation process. He lied, we're for women. You can still try doing that, right? But I want to tell you, there's one little element that came in here that you got to keep in mind. Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort is involved in all of this. How does Paul Manafort relate to all of this? Paul Manafort relates to all of this because the house of cards on Trumpism is going to fall. It is going to. That's another Pam Chat. Maybe later in the week I'll do a Pam Chat very specifically on that. But I'm telling you, Manafort means that the Trump house is on extremely shaky ground. I want to say it's already crumbling. The foundation is tectonically destroyed. Because Manafort is the one thing, the one element that not only ties all of the coincidences together and all that Russian collusion, but he's also the one who can establish intent and knowledge. He can establish what Donald Trump knew and when he knew it. And that is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He can establish that Trump knew what he knew and when he knew it. And even if you were to say he say, she say, no, it's not. In a court of law, it's called evidence. Evidence of intent and knowledge. That's the element that takes it from these coincidences with the Russians to actual conspiracy. That's why I'm telling you the Manafort thing is a really, 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 really big deal. Legally, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. So, if the Trump house is tectonically unstable and you want to die on a hill, I am saying to you, my brothers and sisters in the Republican Party, Brett Kavanaugh is not the hill you want to die on. Because he will bring you down. He will bring you down. Because there's no play here. There's really no play here. That's the way I read these tea leaves. I read these tea leaves. Either, either it happened and he categorically lied about it, or you're going to spend the next 50 days telling women why she shouldn't be believed. And if you want to spend the next 50 days and knock down, drag out nuclear war with the women of the United States of America, okay. But I don't think that's a look you'll like. I don't think that's a look you'll like. Because we're not going to play this time. So just know. Okay? And I don't think full-on battle with 50% of the population is where you want to go in 50 days before an election. I don't think that's where you want to go. So you don't have a play. And in as much as you don't have a play, cut your losses now. And if I were a GOP strategist, which, by the way, I am not, but if I were, I would say, hey, GOP, here's how you can save this horrendous situation. Go withdraw Kavanaugh and then put out a name that will galvanize and rally the GOP. Like Rob Portman, right? Put out a name that everybody likes and say, hey, we can't get him confirmed before the election, but here's a reason for Republicans to turn out. Turn out to get Rob on the Supreme Court. Turn out to get John Kasich on the Supreme Court. Turn out to get John Kill on the Supreme Court. That's a reason for Republicans to turn out and galvanize. That is a reason. And the Republicans are always better at turning out their voters to protect the courts than the Democrats are. We suck at that, to be honest with you. We suck at that. But they are actually pretty good at that. That is a reason to galvanize your troops and get them together, squared away. That is a smart thing to do. Because you're not going to get another person, through the confirmation process in 50 days. That is not happening. So, if you can't get Kavanaugh through, then don't push a bad position that's going to pull everything out from under you because you're barely hanging on as it is, right? So don't do that. That's a stupid move. Now, I'm okay if they decide to push a stupid position. In fact, quite frankly, like it. And eat, because I honestly, I can see where all this is going. And you really want to rile up all of the women of the United States, you do what you did to Juanita Hill. Do it and see what happens. Because I'm not playing this time, and I doubt most of my sisters are either. We know what this looks like, and so do you. So I suggest that you lick your wounds, come to peace with this, and terminate this Kavanaugh nomination now. That's what I recommend. That's how I read these tea leaves. And I hope it's interesting and entertaining and engaging to you, because that's what this Pam Chat is about. But next week, I'm going to talk about this Manafort stuff because it's so deep. It's so deep, and there's so much to it, and I could love to break it all down for you. But anyway, it's been a heck of a week. This is my only thing to you is that I am coming back into town. My dad is coming back into town. I'm going to take care of him for a few days, and then I'll be back in Florida. And it's, it is back to door knocking. It is back to getting the vote out. We cannot sleep on anything. I mean anything. We got to get our vote out in every conceivable way that we can. We got to get everybody registered to vote that we possibly can. Our registered deadline is October 9th. If you don't know that, tattoo it on your forehead. October 9th. And everywhere you go, you should be asking everybody you meet, hey, you registered to vote? No? Let me pull out my iPhone and we can do it right here, right now, because you can register online. If you have a state-issued ID, you can register online. So, get out the vote. And if you were not in the game right now, if you were not knocking doors, making calls, on hustle, text messaging voters, if you're not volunteering with the campaign, if you were not helping your local candidates win, then get with the program. What the hell are you waiting for? This is the election of our lifetimes. Get in the game. You'll be glad you did. And we're going to win. We are. But we're going to work for it. And that's how it's all going to go down. We're going to win. And Kavanaugh is done. Bye, everyone.